Welcome to the Legion of Lean podcast, where we battle mediocrity and build the best versions of ourselves. Get ready to transform.
Welcome to the Legion of Lean podcast. I'm Don Strange. I got my buddy Corey Eggleston with me, a competitor of mine, and also hopefully soon a co-coach here at Street Sculpting. Corey, what are the topics for today? What do you got for me?
Yeah, so I am curious as to how do you go about formulating some sort of plan that will cater to an individual? And because you hear a lot about some trainers that just have like a blanket one-size-fits-all plan, and it's because it's easy for them, right? It's easy for them to push out the same thing. They don't have to worry about looking at the individual. So how do you go about formulating a plan for the individual and not just having a blanket one-size-fits-all approach?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Yeah, you're exactly right. A lot of trainers do that. Well, first of all, I nail it down to what they actually want. And as you're like a competitor, and so as we talked about in the first podcast, I'm like 50 pounds or less. That's what I typically have my demographic. But I do train everybody. And so, but you're more of an elite person. And so for an elite person, I do things differently. I make, you can make some assumptions, but what you'll say, whatever you make assumptions, you make an ass out of me and you, because a lot of people who train or are training for a show, they might not have ever done a show. They might not even know what they're doing. It's so funny because a lot of times you look at a lean person or you look at somebody who's in shape and you think they know what they're doing. And literally, I was just talking to a guy at the gym the other day, and he was telling me what he did. And then he was telling me what he didn't know. And I was honestly shocked that he got the results he did, not knowing as little as he did, because, hard work and a little bit of, manpower, and you can build a body. I remember several years ago, and I'm going to come back to that question. Several years ago, I was on the beach. Me and my wife were in Hawaii. Wonderful place, by the way. You need to go to Hawaii. I think you've been, haven't you? You've been to Europe.
I've never been. It's on the list.
You need to go to Hawaii. And so we're in Hawaii, and I get a phone call from one of my competitors, and she's freaking out. And she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She's competitor. I mean, she's in like the top 0.001% of the population. Nationally qualified bikini competitor. Been with me for 3 or 4 years. And I make some assumptions because I make people plan. I think, okay, they know what they're doing. This person said, "Why haven't you told me about keto?" I was like, "What? I'm going to tell you about keto because I don't need to tell you. You're past keto. You're burning. You don't have any glycogen in your liver. You're lean." Anyway, so it was amazing to me because she said, I want to do keto. Why do you want to do keto? So a lot of times whenever you're talking to even a competitor or somebody who looks the part, they might not know. By the way, your son just walked by the American flag. I love it. Yes, America, squirrel. I love your son. That's awesome. Anyway, so I make some assumptions, but then also I'll ask follow-up questions. Obviously I want to find out what they've done in the gym. I want to find out, but the way that I do things, because I've been doing 25 years, Corey, I don't have a list. I used to have a list. I have a questionnaire where I fill out everything.
Yeah.
But I craft I've been doing it so long, it just integrates. You remember whenever we talked for a long time. First conversation we had was like an hour and a half, but I like it. So I'll talk to anybody for a long time. And involved in that, I got all the answers to my questions because it's just like a wave. And the more you've done it, you just know. But bottom line is you want to find out, obviously, what their goals are. Is it a photo shoot? Because somebody likes you. A photo shoot, is it because photo shoot, you don't have to be quite as lean. You can hide in angles, but you get on stage like you're going to see everything. And so then you find out what they've done before. I'm going to prod you. Remember, I asked you, what did you do before? I want to know what you did because I want to know what works and doesn't work. Because a lot of people with one-size-fits-all approach, they typically work for most people, so I'm not going to bash you. In fact, whenever you train hundreds of clients, it's kind of hard. You got to bring the price point down, so there's going to be some natural things that almost everybody does, right? Everybody does exercise. It's the way it is. But then I look at their body, and I'll say, like I said, you can make some assumptions. 80% of the population sits behind a desk or a sedentary life, even people who are competitors. And so you can make some assumptions. Probably 10 to 15% or 15 to 30% of those people have upper cross syndrome, which is I would never tell them that, by the way, because they're like upper cross syndrome. It's a big nasty word that's not as bad as what people think. It just means you have protracted shoulders. You see people
Yeah.
walk around like that because they're at a desk all the time. Their heads jut forward, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so that's because they got really tight pecs and they got really tight trap and they've got rhomboids are weak and the lower trapezius and medius trapezius is really weak. Is really weak. So you build those up and you don't do as much chest as far as you still do it, but you not as much. And as far as, and then you can make some more assumptions like, okay, well, 80% of the population is sedentary. About 70 to 85% of the public, particularly women, have a anterior pelvic tilt, which that just means,
Okay.
have you ever seen somebody, there's a guy I went to school with, Corey, and it looked like he had a really big butt, man. It looked like he was smuggling like a love seat in his pants. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, my God, it was like, this is weird. You couldn't help but look, you know what I'm saying? I could hitch a ride on that thing. I know his name. I won't own him though. You know what I'm saying? That I won't own him, even though he's probably proud of it. But the deal is, so you see that, and that's obviously if you're a competitor, you got to correct those things because whenever you're looking at a competitor, you want them to be, you know, built exactly right. You know? So those are some things I do, and you can't do it. Everybody, it's not a one size fits all approach. And any good trainer, by the way, if they give you a cookie cutter plan, they should be following up and saying, okay, this, you know, hey, not everybody needs to do this much chest. Not everybody, I'm looking at your body. Okay. For you, we need to work a little more the middle of the back. And so I'll integrate that. I don't know if that answered your question. I don't know if it did. You can ask me a follow-up question.
No, I think it did. Yeah, I think it did, you know, and I think it's important, like you said, you always talk about how you're going to have like that initial conversation with a potential client, right? And you want to figure out, what do they know? What have they done? What do they think they know? Right. Because as you said, a lot of times they will want your stamp of approval on their bad habits.
Oh my gosh, that happens all the time.
Hey, this is what I'm doing, right? This is good. They want you to say, yeah, that's great. When in reality, you're like, no, we should not be doing that.
Yeah.
We're going to do this instead, because in reality, they want to think that they're doing everything right, and you just are going to come in with a little tweak, and then that's going to be the magic, and everything's just going to happen, right? Everything's just going to click. But in reality, you probably have to switch just about everything they're doing, because if what they're doing isn't working, then we got to change it.
That's exactly right.
So that's, you know, it definitely answers my question. And so then the next thing is like, what for someone that needs to lose 50 pounds, do you think? Because you said in the previous podcast that that's kind of your sweet spot, because 50 pounds or less, they haven't really succumbed to the really unhealthy lifestyle, right? They may have had a couple bad years, but this hasn't been, you know, decades of, you know, abuse on their body. So do you think for someone that's 50 pounds or less, is it 50-50 diet exercise? Is it 70-30? What is it? How much emphasis do you have to put on the diet as opposed to the exercise aspect of that?
Well, 70-30, I think, if I was going to give a number. The deal is, if you, especially if you're in that top, if you're in the 50%, if you're 50 pounds or less, that's what you need to lose, and you're kind of wanting to see your abs or something like that. Your diet will let you see what's below the fat. You know, it's like taking off your jacket. If you don't build the body, so it's an arbitrary number as far as 70-30. If you could get lean and do the diet completely right, but you might not like the end result because you don't have any muscle mass. And so they give an arbitrary number as far as 70-30. It's not really good. But as far as being lean, it's all about the body count. Body composition is all about food as far as getting lean. But you're ready for a show. We're really not trying to build muscle mass right now. We're trying to maintain the muscle mass you have. But depending on their level of fitness, when they come with it, they got to lose 50 pounds. Well, they might need to gain 10 pounds or 15 pounds of muscle, right? And so that nutrition program comes up. You know, that's most important. But you also have to bring the workouts just as important. So I'd say 50-50 for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if you're ever in the gym for a long period of time, like 50 pounds, I would probably say a lot of people that are in that 50 pounds weight loss, they've worked down a little. You know, they always talk about what I did in high school. Man, when I was in high school, that was 40 years ago. Let's not lean on that anymore. But those people, what's fascinating is those guys, even if they're ripped in their 20s and now they're 40, it's amazing how quickly it comes back. And so muscle memory is real, and that's
Yeah.
not a cliche. You have neurons in the bellies of your muscles that will map that muscle back real quick. I could take off 3 or 4 months in the gym, not going to, but I could take off 3 or 4 months in the gym, and I would go back and I would get back to where I was before, like within a month. It would happen so
Yeah.
fast. But whenever you first get in those gains, and the first ones are really the hardest. It's actually whenever you gain the fastest, because if you never put on muscle mass, that first year is big. But once you maintain, your body wants to maintain homeostasis, so it'll get to
Yeah.
exactly where it's going to be at, where it wants to be at. Like me, I maintain about 200, and about 190, 185. I'm looking really, really lean, really good.
Uh-huh.
But my body, if I would quit for a while, come back, and so that 50 pounds, if you're right in that level, you probably, most people have worked out with the weights a little bit,
Yeah.
and it'll come back real quick. So the answer to your
Yeah.
question is really depends on what their goal is for you. Obviously, it's especially right now we're not building any muscle mass, and we want to maintain muscle mass.
Yeah.
If you said, Don, what I can't work out. I can't work out. I said, how about get some bands? So we just move your body. That way
Uh-huh.
we're pumping your muscles up and we're maintaining what you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just crazy as it sounds. Even though you're ready for a show, you only got 4 weeks left. You're not building more muscle. You want to maintain what you have. So the diet aspect for you is more important than even the workout.
Yeah.
And the closer it gets, the more that's offset. The closer it gets, like the week out, it's the workout's not even important at all. It's not at
Yeah.
all. And the people are like, oh my God,
Exactly.
I gotta make. You're not gonna make anything. It's over. If you think
Yeah.
you're gonna put on some muscle mass, we want to get rid of glycogen. We want to get rid of water, and then refeed you, and then get rid of all the subcutaneous water before stage. Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't
Gotcha.
even know if I might have wove around your question, but I think I talked in
No, I think
circles
you
and
hit it.
somebody might have got something out of it, hopefully.
I think it. Yeah. I think it's. Yeah. Like you said, it's definitely more so. It depends,
Yeah.
right? So for
Somebody's
most
taking
people,
your
it's
picture.
7
I
to
seen
30.
that. Somebody's
Is
taking your picture.
it?
It's a
I
paparazzi.
know he's doing something back there.
I love
So
that shit.
that leads me into then another follow up question to that. So again, same type of clients, right? So 50-pound or less crowd or competitor, maybe where, and so you're working with them. Let's
Yeah.
say for 4 weeks. Okay,
4 weeks. 4
what
weeks.
kind of is that threshold that you feel that they need to make it past as far as time frame goes, where they're kind of bought in? I know we've kind of talked about that 3 to 6 week range is kind of where it takes to form a habit.
Yeah.
So like if somebody were going, let's say, or if they're going to even fire you, say, hey, this isn't working, I got to go a different route. Where do you kind of see that happen most often? If somebody decides, hey, what you're doing isn't working for me, even though they haven't given it enough time.
Oh,
Does that
typically
make sense? Okay.
within the first 6 weeks, you'll get people like, this really isn't working. And that's okay. Obviously it takes, I just got a text message from somebody today. It's a client of mine who's been my client for 7 years. And he's working out with somebody, and they said, this is taking too long. He's like 4 weeks in. He said, I should have seen way more results right by
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
No, you shouldn't have. It's amazing how people people gain an average of 1 to 2 pounds a year. And
Yeah.
especially those people in the 50 pounds or less, they'll gain 1 to 2 pounds a year. And then they expect, Corey, for me to snap my fingers, and in 6 weeks they lose all that weight.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way. And
Yeah.
also, it's interesting too, because I had this conversation the other day. If you think about how your body, and I'm going to elaborate on this, it probably doesn't have anything to do with it, but this is a very good insight. This is very interesting to me. Your body can create an infinite amount of fat cells, but it never gets rid of fat cells. It gets rid of the calories in those fat cells whenever your body is in ketosis, and it gets rid of those fat cells and uses for energy. Obviously, you probably know a little bit of science behind that. But those fat cells, they go from containing fat for fuel, and then they'll take all that fat out and they'll use it for fuel. I'm giving you like the fourth grade terminology there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they stay the same size and they fill it full of water. Then all of a sudden they'll collapse and they'll shrink completely. And so whenever somebody is really, really overweight, those will collapse really fast, and you'll get rid of them real quick. You'll see somebody lose a whole bunch of water weight real quick, and they won't gain it back that fast. If you get the 50-pounder crowd list, especially women, whenever women are like under 130 pounds, they haven't, and they've never been obese. They haven't created a lot of fat cells, and so the body doesn't really want to shrink them. And so
Yeah,
they'll gain water, they'll lose water, and it doesn't come off of the scale fast at
yeah,
all because they have a limited amount of fat cells versus somebody who's severely obese. And so it might take them a long time. And it's funny, I scratch my head all the time because I tell people all this. I'm a logical thinker. And then plus I make as basic as I possibly can to break it down because I think the easiest solution is typically the best solution. I think there's a quote by Warren Buffett. People have a perverse characteristic to make simple things hard or difficult, and that's what they do with fitness and nutrition. And also the instant gratification. If it doesn't happen right now, it's not happening at all. If we had that
exactly. Yeah,
philosophy and everything, we wouldn't be successful at all. So about 6 weeks, but I don't. That's fine. There's many ways to skin a cat. I'm not for
yeah,
everybody, and so it doesn't bother me whenever people leave. I've been criticized by experts, and so people who don't like my training style and they don't think I'm getting results, it's just a hurt. That's what I'm saying. But it's no big deal. Not that big a
yeah.
deal. Whenever people leave.
Well, there's because everyone has their they think, oh, well, I can go online and find whatever I want. You can find whatever information you want
Mm-hmm.
to support what you want
Justify. Also, this cool.
justify your view. You can find it, and it could be anything. It could be health and nutrition. It can be any view on any sort of thing. You can find two sides of it, and you can use that to then justify why you think that. And so I tell people it's kind of like I eat 20 ounces of red meat a day. And I have people being like, "Well, there's no way that's so unhealthy for you." Like, there's rib, and I go, and I just and I say, yeah, I say you can. Yes, I understand why you say that because that's been the narrative for years, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of the most nutrient dense foods, right? So I'm
Absolutely.
getting X amount of protein from this many ounces, where if I was eating chicken or turkey, it would take this many. So
Absolutely.
I think it's something that people unfortunately need to, I want to say, unlearn, which is difficult, right? You need to unlearn a lot of the things that have been told for years and years, especially from the medical aspect, right? Butter's bad, eggs are bad, limit your egg intake, limit your butter, things like that. And so, unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at now. But I do think, I'm 35. I think with people my age, we're kind of starting to see through the smoke and mirrors that has been cast in front of us for so long, and we're starting to see what is the main what does it boil down to, right? Money, right? So a lot of these things have been pushed because they've been able to make money off of it, right? Off of these vegetable oils and things like that, and butters and butter sprays and egg substitutes, right? All the stuff like you don't need. So now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that's some people can't handle certain types of foods. I understand that's hard to digest things, but I would say for the most part, a lot of those things have been, there's really, if you were to dig deep enough, there's really no foundation to any of those findings. It's someone just came up, decided to say it one day, and everyone decided to run with it. So I don't know where I was getting at with that.
You know what's fascinating though? You said some results don't lie, and what's fascinating. Once again, I don't think you're beating up the medical establishment. I'm not beating up the medical establishment, but results don't lie. We're great. If I promise you this, if somebody I know is having a heart attack, I'm not going to say, "Hey, go to Corey. Go to Corey. He's having a heart attack. I'm going to call Corey. What do I do?" He said, "Forget the hospital, Jack. And this guy, hey, my neighbor's having a stroke, Corey. What should I do? Freaking call 911, you numbskull."
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah.
We have phenomenal emergency care in the United States. They'll keep you alive. You go to if you have a heart attack or something, they'll keep you alive. But as far as our chronic health, it sucks. And if you don't understand it, you're crazy. I mean, they're not crazy. I'm sorry. You just don't understand. The results don't lie. And so our chronic health keeps getting worse. We spend more money per capita than any other country in the world for our health care. And we got the worst health outcomes. You got to be kidding me. The chronic health and also life expectancy is going to go down for the first time ever in history with the next generation. That's crazy. But I'm going to ask you a question, and then we'll get off this soapbox. But you know how I feel about this, and so I'm going to let everybody know how I feel about this, right?
Okay.
But let me ask you a question, Corey. What percentage of the population of people that are 18 to 34 are on a pharmaceutical drug? What do you think that number is?
I would say nowadays it's got to be over half.
Well, you're right, 60%.
60%.
From the age of 35 to, what's that other number? 35, 35 to 64. What do you think that number is? What do you think?
That's got to be 90%.
80%. So you're pretty close.
80%. Okay.
Over the age of 65, it's 90%.
90%.
That's
Yeah.
freaking nuts, man. Everybody's on prescription drugs. And I'm not opposed to it. I get a headache, I'll take a Tylenol. I do, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to pharmaceutical drugs, but they're not solutions. They cover symptoms. And so you got to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I think a lot, and I think a lot of people are starting to understand that a lot of those issues, and not all of them, like I said, there are needs for those, like you just said, for the pharmaceuticals, but a lot of those issues, the first response should not be a pharmaceutical, right?
No.
Prescription drug. It should be, okay, well, let's see, how much are you exercising? What do you eat on a daily basis? How much are you sleeping? And I think the problem is those aren't the questions that are asked by most doctors. It's just like, hey, your cholesterol's high. Here's this. Hey, your blood pressure's high. Here's this. Oh, you can't sleep. Here's this. Instead of saying, well, why can't you sleep? Let's see. Okay, well, maybe if you exercise for 30 minutes a day, and maybe if you cut out whatever you're eating at 9 o'clock at night, maybe that will help. Maybe if you stop drinking whatever soda at 7:30 at night, it'll help you with your sleep. Things like that, I think, is kind of like where we're moving, and where I think people want to move. And I mean, and I'll I'm not trying to get political, but I think a lot of people don't understand, like, what RFK is trying to do. He's not trying to ban vaccines.
He's trying to ban it. He is. That's ridiculous.
He's saying you should have the choice if you want to do it or not. It should not be forced on anyone, which I think that's the most logical thing to say, right? It's not saying that you can't do this or you can't do that. It's just saying no one should be telling you that you have to do this certain medical procedure, right? I think he's saying that we should, in order to solve our chronic health problems in the United States, right? I mean, and I don't need, the obesity rates are skyrocketing. And I mean, even in elementary school kids, the amount of kids that are overweight is horrible. And so I think it's saying those are the things that need to be addressed. It needs to be, we need more exercise. We need more nutritional advice and education for people, instead of just saying, oh, count your calories. Well, that doesn't always work. Yes, you need to count your calories, but you also need to understand, vitamins and nutrition and minerals and things like that your body needs, that you're not getting because our food is so nutrient deficient, because of the over farming, because of the pesticides, because of all that stuff. And again, that's what people are starting to understand now. And that's 100%. Kind of where we're hoping things go, is that you have that choice. And, if I go and buy an organic apple, well, it's $5 a pound. But if I buy non-organic, it's $2 a pound. And so that's also the problem, is that someone that is not financially stable enough, right, they can't go buy those things. So they have to buy the cheaper version, unfortunately. And so they don't have a choice but to probably, ingest some of those chemicals and pesticides and glyphosates and things like that that are used on those foods. And so that's the unfortunate thing as well, is that in our country now, to eat healthier is more expensive. And so I can go get a Domino's pizza for $6 and that'll last me 2 days, right? I can go to McDonald's and buy, I haven't been to McDonald's in years, but I'm assuming it's probably still similar prices, right? Yeah. I can go buy 10 cheeseburgers for $15, or $20 or whatever, and that'll last me 2 days. So, and that's the problem, is people, it's convenience and it's cost. And until people can see eating healthy is important, until we can make it more readily available to, the masses. Fortunate for us and my family is we're able to do that. We're able to buy, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. We're able to do, buy organic chicken and things like that, free range or pasture-raised eggs, because again, that's something that people don't understand. I go, free range doesn't mean diddly. It just means that there's still, and so those types of things. And so like I said, a lot of people can't do that. And it's unfortunate. And I understand that. And so to address people that say, well, I can't afford, the grass-fed beef, I can't afford the organic chicken, I was like, buy what you can, because buying that is still better than going to Domino's or McDonald's.
Oh, 1,000%.
or buying the frozen meals that are, $1.50 a piece.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's what I tell, kids that I teach. That's what I tell friends and family, just make your food, buy your whole foods, buy your chicken, your rice,
Absolutely.
your beef, things like that. Even whether it's, if you can buy organic, great. If you can't, it's still better than the alternative.
100%.
So,
You got to
so
kind
yeah,
of crawl before you walk. And so, because some of the people that are over the 50-pound mark, it's like, man, trying to get them to eat anything healthy is like really tough. And so, I wouldn't expect them to, but somebody like you're more, you've thought more about health consequences. You've been down that road a little further. But yeah, I would tell anybody, do the best you can till you can do better. And so,
yeah,
if you can't afford the organic, still get lean sources of meat. Do the best you can. You know,
yeah.
ground beef, regardless of how bad people think it is, it's way better than what's the name of that? It's Beyond Beef, Beyond
Oh,
Meat,
all those,
or
yeah, all
Impossible
those
Burger.
Impossible
Impossible Burger.
Burger, yeah, and
Impossible is
whatnot.
good for your burger, so it's way better
Yeah,
than that stuff. And I didn't even mean to get on a tangent of veganism, but it's processed stuff. Basically, that's what it's processed. The more processed, the more crap in the back of the ingredient list of your package. Probably just using common sense, the worse it is for you. And there's a lot of
yeah,
educated morons that tell you opposite. It's like, that stuff's bad. I remember one time I was in an argument. I just didn't respond to him because I break down basic. Because I said
yeah,
earlier, I think people overcomplicate everything, and so I say, hey, the more ingredients are on the list, probably of the
that's
food you're eating, the worse it is.
yeah,
That's
nutrition
pretty
101,
that's
I think.
pretty
Yeah,
that's pretty common sense. But I'll always have somebody who's really educated far beyond their intelligence. They'll give me a name of one of those things. This is in apples. Yeah, sure, it's in apples. God made it, and it's not
yeah,
isolated and put in freaking bread. You moron. Anyway,
exactly.
get pretty hostile
So
about this.
and I mean, yeah, like you said, do what you can until you can do better. And yeah, and like I've had people come up and ask me, hey, like I'm trying to gain some muscle, I'm trying to do this or that, I'm trying to eat a little better, but and the next thing is, well, I'm a vegan or a vegetarian or whatnot. So if you're a vegetarian, okay, do you eat eggs? Yeah, okay, well then let's try to load up on the eggs, things like that. But
Yeah.
if you're vegan, I ask, where to get your protein source from, and so beans and things like that. The amount of beans you would have to eat a day to try to get the amount of protein that you would need. So it's just like, I think that's also the education problem is, beans have protein, so I can just get them from that. Like, yeah, beans do have protein, it's great to add to things,
Yeah.
but that cannot be your only source of protein unless you're just eating mounds and mounds of beans every day, right? Which your plumbing will be working well, right, after all that fiber, but
Yeah.
it can't be your only source. And so we got to figure out how to supplement that. Because if you really are a vegan, that's just going to lead me to my next question with you is, if somebody comes to you and they say, I'm a vegan or a vegetarian, how do you approach that with them?
Well,
Because knowing you and knowing me, right, working out protein is,
yeah.
numero uno, right? You got to get a lot of protein. And so how do you approach that with someone if they tell you?
I hope you enjoyed the Legion of Lean podcast. Stay lean, hit subscribe, and join us next time.